Good morning, everybody. You doing all right? Like a handful of you are. The rest of you are like, it's too early. I need coffee. We have coffee out there. Make sure you grab some before you're on your way in. If you have a Bible, we're going to kind of jump right in. Turn over to Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10 is where we're going to be today. And that's in the New Testament of the Bible. If you're not familiar with getting around your Bible, you can look in the table of contents. Look, the Bible's broken up into Old Testament and New Testament. Look for New Testament, look for Luke, and flip over to chapter 10, and we'll be in verse like kind of 29 and following in a little bit. And you can download a digital Bible. We talk about this a lot. Look for the Life Church or YouVersion Bible in your app store. You can download that as audio Bibles, reading plans, and all kinds of other stuff. It's really great, and we hear all the time from people just about how much they enjoy engaging that and using that. And so, man, I am so glad that you're with us as we continue our series at the Movies Heroes. And we're going to kind of be jumping in a little bit. But before we get to the meat of what's the point of what we're going to be talking about today, I just want to know, and I've shared this before, someone actually said it like, I'm not going to hug you today because I know you're not a hugger. How many of you are huggers? Like if someone said you're a hugger, all right, like a whole section popped up, they're like, we hug, we close. Like I'm not really a hugger. I'm trying. I'm doing better at that. Like, not that I don't like physical contact and those kind of things. Football's awesome. And so, but hugging, it's just, there's something about it. And guys usually aren't like amazing, like, I'm a hugger. You know, like guys don't do that sort of thing. Some guys do, and they're like, I'm just sensitive, and that's cool. You can do that. That's awesome. But I'm not that guy, but I'm trying to get there. I have girls, and they're all about like, I love you, Daddy. Like earlier, my little girl is just like yanking on my leg, and they're like, I just want to love you. And I'm like, no, you just don't want to go to class right now. And so you just want to snack in the lobby, and we told you no. But there's hugs and just something about them. I'm like, I'm getting there. My family, they were a hugging family. But I'm just like, I don't know. And in college, there was a guy that I knew, and his name was Zach Cooper. Zach Cooper, he was a big guy. He was one of those guys that if you saw him walking down an alley, you kind of be like, I'm not messing with that guy. Like at all. Kind of tall. He was a little bit taller than I was, and he was big. He played football in high school, and in Bible college, you think like, oh, everybody is going to be nice and whatever. Like you see him, and you're like, I'm not quite sure he loves Jesus. Like he looks scary. Like I'm frightened of you, and I ended up living in the same hall as Zach Cooper, and actually came to a place a couple semesters later where there were 4 of us crammed in a room in loft beds so we could have a separate room, which was the chill room is what we called it, and we stacked couches and everything, and we got in a lot of trouble. But we stacked couches and got a big screen TV, and it was awesome, and everybody wanted to hang out. But there was something about being in the same room with Zach that I learned is even though Zach looked intimidating and he looked a little angry at times, Zach was a hugger. Like, and you couldn't notice it but he would come up in just big arms, and something would be happening. He's like, and he would get this big smile all of a sudden, and you knew. We called it the Zach attack, and that's not from Saved by the Bell, Zach attack. That's different. Those of you guys anybody watch the unofficial biography? Is that on Lifetime? You should have. I just admitted I watched Lifetime. Oh, sorry, and so. Masculinity down a notch. And so, it was great though. I'm so scared. Sorry, some of you guys will remember that episode with Jesse Spano. And so, he get the smile, wheel derail, the hamster falls asleep at the wheel sometimes. We got to rev it back up. He would get this smile, and we're like, it's time for a Zach attack. It's coming. And you never knew who it was, so all of us would start back away slowly and like just keep our eye out for him. And sure enough, he'd smile, just bear hug you, and you're like, oh, I don't need to get readjusted this week because you just broke my spine. And he would just hug you and hug you and hug you. And you would try to get away from Zach as he would get into these modes. But one day, I was just down. I was sitting in the room, and because I was one of the littler guys, I had to have the top bunk that gave me like this much room between the ceiling. So I'm just laying there, and I'm like sad because I had just broken up with my girlfriend. And it was one of those like moments, and I say I broke up with her, but I think it was a little more mutual, and by mutual I mean she definitely broke up with me. And so I'm a little emotional and just sad, and Zach comes walking in the room. It's after early classes because I was smart and I never scheduled early classes. And so I'm just kind of laying there, and I'm in my own pity party, and Jason, I'm under the covers, and I'm crying, okay? I admit it, I was crying. And so I'm under the cover, and all of a sudden I hear this, Jason. And I'm like, oh man, here we go. Jason, get down here. I'm like, Zach, I'm not getting down here. No, you get down here right now. And he like gets stern and I'm like, you don't cross a dude that big. Like when he says jump, you say how high. And so I get down and he's like, you need a hug, don't you? I'm like, no, I don't, Zach, I do not need a hug. And he gets the smile. He's like, you need a Zach attack, don't you? And so I'm like, no, I do not need a Zach attack right now. And before I could even like get all the words out, he's just like embracing me and he's now lifted me up off the ground. And I'm just like, my feet are wiggling around. I feel like I'm 5 years old. And he's just like, doesn't this feel awesome? I'm like, no, it doesn't. Not at all. And like, he walks over to, he's still holding me at this point, walks over to his bed, sits down, and I'm like, I'm at his mercy. He's huge. And so he's like, you know what? And I'm like, what do you want to let me know? He's like, I love you, man. I'm like, this is a little awkward. We're the only two dudes in this room right now. And you're holding me on your bed. Can we not? And he's like, and he kind of like realizes like, oh yeah, if anybody walked in right now, right at this moment, he's just like sitting on his bed with a big happy face holding me, and I'm like getting crushed. Either they think he's killing me, or it's like, a little bunny, I'm gonna pet it and love it and call it my, like that's what I looked like in his arms. And so he's doing this and he's not petting me, that would have been weird. But he's holding me and he finally lets go because he realizes that it's awkward. So I sit down next to him on the bed and I'm just like, man, I'm just really down. He's like, you know what? Like, I think sometimes hugging and all that stuff, he's like, I know people think I'm weird. He's like, I just like to hug. And he said, when you don't have the words to say, sometimes people just need to know that they're loved. And I was like, man, even though we had just walked through a very awkward man moment, there was something to be said for just knowing somebody cared. Just knowing that somebody loved me in not a weird, creepy, awkward way, but just a, hey man, I know you're hurting, and I want to let you know it's okay to hurt sometimes, and there's people here for you. And I think we need that. I think you and I need moments where people are just going to say, you know what, I love you. And not to get awkward or weird. And I don't think guys do this enough, like, hey man, I love you, bro. Like we have to say bro at the end because it's okay. It's like when we also hug, we got to do the I'm still a dude tap. Like we're still boys. Like this isn't creepy. And girls will just come, I love you, and they'll hug each other and you're like, whoa, time out. Like guys don't do that. If you do that in the lobby, I'm going to call you out, all right? Like there's like, you need to come up, hey man, what's up? Love you too. All right, yeah, all right, bro, yeah, bro, all right. But I think we need to know that we're loved. I think we need to know that there's someone else walking this out with us, that we actually have moments where you're a person and I'm a person and we're coming together and like we're living this life and doing this life together. And we're in this series, At the Movies Heroes, and sometimes the hero that we need is another person coming into our life and saying, you know what, let's walk this out together. And if you don't get anything else today, and we talk about this main idea and this main point every single week, because sometimes we're ADD and our brains get scattered and things happen, but we need to know that we are loved and that amazing things can happen in our life when we trust an absolutely miraculous God. And so if you're taking notes today and writing things down, I want you to walk away with this. It's that to love people, you need to be present, be active, and overflow. To truly love people without any boundaries, with reckless abandon, you need to be able to be present, be active, and have this overflow in your life. And I think that's what heroes are truly all about. You watch these heroes that go all throughout comic books and movies and all these things, and they just want to care for, to save, to rescue, to come alongside and protect people. And this week we're looking at probably one of my favorite heroes in movies, and that's The Amazing Spider-Man. And it's actually the newest one, not the Tobey Maguire one, because he was a little too like, hey. Like there's the new guy from The Social Network, I don't even know his name, and there's just, the movie is absolutely fantastic. And if you haven't seen it, here's the trailer for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 that we're going to dive into today.
You know what it is I love about being Spider-Man? Everything.
Peter Parker, Harry Osborn. It's
10 years. What have you been up to? I do some web design. Nice arm. It's just the wrist, just on the wrist, buddy. Peter, you're gonna want to see this. Oscorp had you under surveillance. Why? Isn't that the question of the day? Nothing is what I thought it was.
I once told you that secrets have a cost. The truth does too.
My name is Richard Parker. I have discovered what Oscorp was going to use my research for.
What is all this?
The future. We have plans for you, Peter Parker. You wanted to be the hero.
Need a hand?
Now you gotta pay the price.
We have the power now. We can change the world.
Then let's go catch a spider.
I made a choice. This is my path.
This is bigger than you, Peter.
I'm the only one who can stop them. I'm Spider-Man. I gotta go.
I'm coming with you.
Come on, it's too dangerous. Sorry, I love you. Don't hate me.
So in this movie, and I love the Spider-Man movies, and we're not going to get it too much into the plot, because I think all of us, if we say, hey, have you ever heard of Spider-Man or seen any of these things? I think the resounding answer would be yes. There's been something about his character that Stan Lee created that we embraced, that we loved. And part of that is that he was human. And we connected, I think many of us connect more to the Peter Parker character, his real everyday side, than to the Spider-Man side. And when the actor that played Spider-Man was quoted in Relevant magazine, he talked about what does it mean to resound with Peter Parker. And so he says this, he says, Spider-Man has the skill and the gift, Garfield says, but what Peter brings, here he trails off for a second trying to think of the right words. Peter is what makes Spider-Man special. The compassion and humanity. The idea of love thy neighbor. That's the very reason that Peter got into this. You see his Uncle Ben was killed in an accident, and it spurs Peter on at first to revenge, but realizes very quickly that he needs to be someone that protects, someone that cares for, someone that loves other people, someone that goes out and makes sure that people are cared for and taken care of. And so we see this mission to love people, to be active, to be present, to be overflowing. But I think we miss that sometimes in the cause for following God, in chasing after him and echoing what he does. Because I don't think that our perception of who God is matches up with who he really is. And so as we try to chase after him, we see some things about him that actually turn us off from living the life fully that he's designed us to be so that we could be a hero for someone else. There's this awesome book, and I would highly recommend you picking it up. It's by Shane Claiborne. It's called The Irresistible Revolution. And he shares this in one of the later chapters. He says, whenever someone tells me they've rejected God, I say, tell me about the God you've rejected. And as they describe a God of condemnation, of laws and lightning bolts, and a frowning gray-haired people, and boring meetings, I usually confess, I too have rejected that God. I meet a lot of Christians who say, if people knew all about my struggles and weaknesses, they would never want to be a Christian. I think just the opposite is true. If people really knew what idiots we are sometimes in all of our brokenness and our vulnerability, they would know that they can give this thing a shot too. Christianity is for everyone. We're all broken, we're all sick, and we all need a loving God that we can mirror our lives after. And so I think we need to repaint the picture of who God is. And who is any readers out there? Any people like to read? Here, you can have that copy. That's my beat up copy. So next service gets a brand new copy. So there you go. And so you guys are good with beat up copies. You're fine. And there's something about that story about saying, you know what is that picture of God for you and I? What is the picture of love and of grace? And what does he want to do inside of us? Because I think that passion that Peter has is the same passion that God wants you and I to have in every facet of our lives. Now, you've been holding over in that passage over in Luke, but I want to read off some things that God believes for you and I. They're going to be on the screens here. We're going to fly through some of these. John 17:26. I have made you known to them. This is Jesus talking, and will continue to make you known in order that the love you have for me, he's Jesus and God, the love that you have for me may be in them, in you and I, that I myself may be in them. Jesus is saying, listen, God, I'm making your name known, and I want them to know you, and that your love and my love, it will overflow out of them. John 13:34 and 35. A new command I give you, to love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples, you're my followers, you're my church, you're believers in him. If you what? Love one another. Matthew 5:16, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven. Matthew 5:42 in the New Testament says, give to one another, give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. John 15:12, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have what? Loved you. 1 John 3:17, but if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens. Pretty simple. Ephesians 4:28 in the New Testament, let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, let him work, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with just one person in need, right? No. Anyone in need. Philippians 2:4, let each of you look not only to his own interests, that's a little countercultural, don't you think? Everything that we see on Twitter and everything in this new world that we live in as things progress points back to us. Look at my page. Look at my status. Look at my life. Look at my job. Look at my family. Everything points inward. Let each of you not look to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. 1 John 4:19 and 20. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, this is a hard truth. He's a liar. For he who does not love his own brother, you might ask, who's your brother? People sitting next to you, your neighbor, your coworker, the person that you pass on the highway, the person that you go through the drive-thru and they mess up your order, the waitress that doesn't have everything together, the moment that someone, when you're out in public and they do you wrong or do you good, either way, that's your brother. It's everyone around us. But hates his brother, he's a liar. For who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love a God who he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him, whoever loves God must also love his brother. And that's hard. There's some hard stuff in there. Because if you're anything like me, living that stuff out is difficult. Whether you love God or you don't, and you're not there yet, living that stuff out is real hard. Each day when you wake up and you go, man, I have to love everybody today. Man, loving people, I think we'd all be in agreement that loving people is hard. I had a friend of mine that I worked with for many years when I was doing student ministry, and she was just so amazing and loving, but we would talk about things, and sometimes she would have interactions with people, and she was in children's ministry, and she's like, man, dealing with kids is great, but sometimes their parents, they get a little wacky. And we're going on, and I'm like, yeah, parents can have quirks, whatever. And she's like, man, just being in public sometimes, I just don't understand why people don't have common sense. It's not common anymore. And she would go on. And I'm like, okay, and listen. And she's like, I hate to say it, I have just a low tolerance for stupid. And I was like, yikes, I don't know if you could say that out loud. And she's like, no, it's just hard dealing with people. And she's like, I kind of see things and I see this and I go, that seems plain as day. But then there's other people who kind of walk in and they go, huh? And she's like, I just don't understand about it. And so it's very difficult dealing with people because they hurt you, they steal from you, they lie to you, they let you down. And I'm like, well, yeah. Life, we're going to have every single person, even the person picture the person you love the most in this world. That person's going to let you down. Like that person's going to make mistakes. That person will fall short of your expectations of perfection. I will. The rest of the staff will. The guys leading worship on Sunday mornings will. The ushers will. The parking people will, even though they're awesome. And, they're, woo, parking people, all right. They're do a little, I'm not going to do a Russian because then I'll hurt and I'll just be like walking. It would be hard. And it just like people will let you down. People will hurt you. People will make mistakes. And so how do we walk through life in loving people, being a hero for others so that their life can be revolutionized, their life can be changed, that what they see in this existence can change because of your life? We don't think about that a lot. We don't wake up in the morning and go, how can I inspire people? How can I be a light to others that shines bright when everything else seems really dark? Like, we don't think about that a lot, but that's the very mission that Jesus came. That's why when you walk in to the auditorium on Sundays, there's that mission statement out there that we would be people helping people to find and follow Jesus. That our life is when we follow him, when we surrender our lives to him, and that word sounds a little weird, surrender. Like, I don't know about surrender. Like, I'll follow him, I'll do that, but surrender my life? Yeah. Surrender it. And it sounds weird that if you surrender your life, that your life could be free, but it's absolutely true. That when you give God every bit of you, you are more free than you ever were when you're like, I'll do it on my own. And as we live out this life, this mission, this purpose of being people helping people to find and follow Jesus, our life is revolutionized and everybody we interact with is changed by your life. Every single person. Because when everybody else gets mad that something happened on the news and everybody's like, and go into Facebook and I can't believe that. And you're the person going, well, I want to believe the best and I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. You probably weren't there either. And so maybe we should pray for them. Or maybe, maybe it's not as bad as we think it is. We don't know yet. And so let's check that out and see. And so we have these moments where we can take things and look at the world and we see things differently. That's why you see the globe all the time. People go, hey, that globe's turned upside down? I'm like, yes, I do. Everywhere you see it, every single time. It was funny, when all of the workmen were here and doing that, it probably about 3 or 4 times a week, somebody would go, hey, that globe's upside down. You guys, well, why'd you do that? And we get to talk to him. Actually, Jesus came, and this world is one way, and Jesus explains this amazing change that happens. That we say, oh, well, if somebody hurts me, I'm going to hurt him back. And Jesus would go, no, you don't need to hurt them. You actually need to love them. And you go, that's weird. And yeah, when you're let down, you shouldn't go on social network and be like, I can't believe it's so-and-so and tag them in a post and whatever. You should actually, you guys laugh. You're like, I'm laughing because someone else did it. Yeah, I see you on Facebook. We see you out there. And you just go, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to do the opposite. I'm going to call them up and say, hey, let's get together. I'm real sorry this has happened between us. How can we fix this? That's very countercultural to the way that the world tells us to live. And so how do we dive into that and do that? And if you are following along and you've been holding over in your Bible, we're going to share this story. And I'm actually not going to read it, but I want you to be able to hold it, mark it, and be in there. We're going to look at this story of the Good Samaritan. Now, this might be one of the stories that if you're at all familiar with God or been around church a while, you've probably heard this story. But this is an amazing example of what it means to live like a hero. It's the very mirroring of what Peter Parker wanted his life to be, inspiring hope and helping others and loving others. So if you're holding over there, we're kind of going to talk about how to love people. And one of the first things that you need to be, and if you're taking notes, we're going to look at a few of these, to truly love people, you need to be present. Now, can you love somebody if you're not around? Well, there would be part of that. You say, well, I could call them up, or I could send an email, or I, send them a little text message and say that. But you still, to be able to engage that, you actually have to be present. You have to be able to connect with them in life. And you can't love someone unless you show up. Unless you show up via text message, via phone, via actually your physical presence, being there and being in a crisis and what's happening. And in this story, there's this man who is traveling and gets hit up by robbers. He's beaten up, he's stripped of his clothes, and he's left for dead, and he's laying there on the side of the road, and it's amazing to me. I read this story, and if you've ever read this story, and as we walk through it, we may say we wouldn't do that. I wouldn't be that person. I would, and let's look at this a bit, because as it happens, and this person's laying on the side of the road, this Jewish person, a priest walks by. Now you would think, oh, surely someone, a man of the cloth, so a priest, someone who they would stop. They would surely stop and love on them and say, hey, how can I help you? What do I need to do? Stop, but no. The text there over in Luke says that he went around him on the road and continued on. You're like, wait a second, I wouldn't do that. Well, there have been people hurting. How many times have we pulled up to a stoplight and someone's held a sign there that says, hungry will work for food? And maybe the first thought into your mind is, sure, maybe, or maybe you said, you need to get a job. It gets real quiet then, because maybe you thought that before. Or maybe it's just me. I think if we're honest with ourselves, we might have let ourselves think and go places that we're like, man, I don't know. And Jesus would not want us to go there. That's not the example that he sets. We read through all those passages. Jesus sets an example of love for you and I, to love other people, to share with other people, to be what the world isn't. And I think for all of us, we've experienced times where we've been down and people have walked by. And to be able to truly love people, we need to show up, to be active, to be present in their lives. And so we see this priest and he walks on by, and then we see another guy, this Levite, this is what it says, is that as he's sharing and this is happening, the Levite comes alongside, sees him down and out, beat up and stripped of his clothing, and so he's like, uh-oh, I don't know about that. Keeps right on by. You're like, man, what in the world? How many people need to walk by before they need help? Maybe you've been that person where you go, I'm not going to stop, but I'm sure, and I don't have time to call, but I'm sure somebody will. Like you've kind of walked through that. I've justified that before. I've driven past something where I go, man, I have my girls with me in my car. I can't stop right now. If I stop right now, what am I going to do with my kids and this and that? Or, my wife, Carrie, and I have talked, and she's like, well, what if I'm alone? And I what happens? And there's a guy there, and I understand safety and all of these things, but at what point do we say, the God of all creation, the God who made you and I unique and individual, at what point do you and I say, you know what? If that God can put breath into my lungs and pump blood through my veins, at what point do we say, he might be able to protect me and look over me in that situation? It's just a thought. I think sometimes we get so comfortable in our American Christianity, in our American culture, that we go, you know what? Or we go, oh, there's bad people out there. There will always be bad people. There will always be hurting, and there will always be times where we can make a justification on why we shouldn't stop, why we shouldn't help, why we shouldn't engage. But who's going to stop and be a part? Who's going to stop and say, you know what? I'll do it. Sometimes it's the most unlikely people. Then we get to this Samaritan that walks by this Jewish person. And this is interesting because Samaritans and Jews did not talk to one another. Not at all. It would be much like during the times of the United States where we were segregated. It would be like a minority talking to a white person. All right? This would be, and that was very faux pas. You don't do that. You go your places, I go my places. This is what it was like for them, only on a much grander scale. And so for this Samaritan to even process through that, what if somebody walks by and sees me? I will be shunned. People won't talk to me anymore. If they see me with that person, there is no way that anyone will ever love, care for, speak to me. My family will disown me. My family will be like, you know what, I don't want to deal with that, and they'll move on. But all they think about is that person's down, that person's out, that person is hurt. And so what does the Samaritan do? Stops. Begins to clean them up, bandage up their wounds, takes them into town, pays for them to stay at the inn. But not only that, tells the innkeeper, you know what? If there's any other costs, here's some money, but if there's any other costs, I'm going to be back through town. Let me know, and I want to care for them. Man, we don't see that every day. We don't see that happening in our culture all that often. It might be one of those 1 in a million things that gets shared a bazillion times on social networking. Oh, this is the feel-good story of the month, and everyone clicks on it. But what if our life was just filled with those moments? That your life was constantly something that BuzzFeed would repost and repost over and over because your life is just that amazing. And not because you go, oh man, these are the amazing things, but that's what God calls us to be. Revolutionary, people that change the course of history. One person can be a catalyst for change. One person. And that's what is awesome about being a part of Forefront Church is we watch people constantly decide, you know what? If I'm going to love people, I'm going to be present. If I'm going to love people, I'm going to be active in what's happening. That's why the PIN homeless ministry, you know where it started? Right out of the doors of Forefront Church. A Forefronter said, you know what? I just want to help feed homeless people. So they started making sandwiches. Just showing up at the beach, handing out sandwiches. For too long, it's turned into one of the largest nonprofits in the Hampton Roads area, meeting the needs of hundreds of homeless people. Churches all over the area pouring in, and we're one of those churches. And it was one of our elders at the time who actually said, you know what, this is getting too big. I actually need to be a part of this every week, and couldn't show up here because it was growing so much there to be able to impact them. We started another nonprofit, Aid Now, and watched is these fantastic people that manned it have moved through, and this past time they impact over like 500-600 homeless teenagers in the Virginia Beach school system. And you guys were a part of that, of serving, bringing clothing, bringing all kinds of resources so that we could see their lives changed. That should be an every week story for us. That every week we're coming in and going like, what were you doing this week? And I'm like, man, I was able to, and not to like puff ourselves up and go, look what I did. It's to be able to say, man, you're doing that too, man. Look at what I'm getting to be a part of. And it's to show everything is a mirror back to God. That my life mirrors Him. That my life is just shining back, and out of the overflow of your life and my life, that people are continually changed by the love and grace of God. You know, we're supposed to be poised and ready to be messengers of hope. Messengers of hope. That people see our life and they go, man, I don't know about you, but if I could be anything like them, that the world would be forever changed. In this story of Peter Parker in The Amazing Spider-Man, he gets kind of down and he sits, and I love this scene. Before this scene happens, he starts sitting down and he's listening to a speech that his girlfriend had given in the beginning that he missed because he was fighting crime and got there late. And he puts the thumb drive in and he listens to the speech. And I want you to listen to the words of Gwen Stacy. It's almost as if she might actually have been listening to God a little bit and giving us a challenge. And I wonder if you watch cinema, if you watch these things, if you're ever picking up on some of these cues. She shares this. It's easy to be hopeful on a beautiful day. There will be dark days ahead of us too. Days where you feel all alone. And that is when hope is needed most. No matter how buried it gets or how lost you feel, you must promise that you will hold on to hope. Keep it alive. We have to be greater than that in which we suffer. My wish for you is to become hope. A manifestation of hope breathing in and out for all mankind. People need it. Even if we fail, what better way is there to live? What better way than to echo and mirror that of God and live out a life of hope in something, in someone greater? As Peter Parker sits and he's watching this in his room, he finally gets inspired because he had given up on being Spider-Man. Well, a scene's playing out in the very moment, because it always happens that way in the movies, where an enemy is in the city and Spider-Man's nowhere to be found. And sure enough, this young kid from the barricades, crawls underneath, and his mom goes screaming. She's like, no, that's my boy. And they stop her, and they try to stop him, but he runs out too fast. And he stands there in front of the enemy. And he's standing there in his little suit, and he pulls the little mask over. You know why he does it? Because he's been inspired by someone. So you know what? If they can stand for it, so can I. And this little kid, when the whole crowd is behind barricades, when the police are shuddering in their uniforms, this child stands before the enemy and says, you know what, I can take you because I've seen someone who gave me hope and I can do the same thing. Maybe for us, we need to learn from this kid. We see this scene play out, and sure enough, Spider-Man swoops in. He says, hey. And the kid takes off his mask and said, I knew you'd show up. I knew you'd be here. He says, hey, why don't you go back and take care of your mom? I'm going to take care of this guy. He says, all right, and they give each other knuckles, because that's what dudes do. Gives each other knuckles, and he runs off. And what does Spider-Man do? Well, of course, like all movies, Spider-Man saves the day. But I think the hero of the story is this kid. The person who stood in the face of it when they were shown in mirroring what it looks like to love, care for, and protect others. And you've seen it modeled. You've seen it modeled through the pages of Scripture as you come week after week. You've seen it modeled in people's lives that either tagged you in a post or invited you here or said, hey, you know what? There's a place where you can learn about an amazing God unlike anything we've ever seen. The God of all creation, the God of second chances, the God who loves you more than anything you can ever imagine is calling for you and I to step up and love others. Love others with reckless abandon. That other people go, that's a little crazy. Be like, yeah, it's crazy. I just love people. And they're like, would you ever put yourself in danger? I love people. Why would you ever do that? That doesn't even make sense. I know it doesn't make sense. Because my God is beyond all comprehension. And some things don't make sense, but when I trust Him, things work out. Things move forward. Things change. People's lives are changed. That's my challenge to you, is that you will be a hero in someone else's life, that you will stand in the gap for someone else, that it will be a love revolution, that you and I will stand and people will look at us and they'll see our lives and they'll go, man, that is weird. Man, that doesn't make sense. Man, you're a little bonkers, but I want to be like you. I want to stand up for other people. And when we have a church filled with people like that, living and breathing out in the community, people's lives will be forever changed. So maybe we can learn a little bit from Peter Parker. A story that may seem plain and oh, that's cool, and we go and we clap and we eat our popcorn and we leave. Maybe, just maybe, there's some timeless truths that these people, as they write these movies, are pulling from that are much bigger than anything they even understand. Why do you think people go and spend millions of dollars at the box office? Why? Because people are longing for something more, to get away and to be something greater. It's right here. He's right here. My prayer is that you would trust in Him, that you would learn to love Him, and you'll learn to love others as we strive to be people helping people to find and follow Jesus.